This week, Doug, we've put this off for a few weeks now. Obviously, it's been a couple of weeks since Deshaun Watson was reinstated by the NFL after his 11-game suspension, stemming from all the allegations of sexual assault, the multiple lawsuits. I believe there was 24 women with different accusations. Now, obviously, now that he's on the field, it's that situation where those of us who cover the game, we have to talk about what he's doing on the field as a player. It hasn't been great for the Browns as a team, and what the way their offense has looked the last couple of weeks. If you look at the numbers here, they beat the Texans a couple weeks ago in his first game, right? But then obviously they play Cincinnati on Sunday and they get beat 23-10. Over those two games, 38 of 64 for 407, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, passer rating of 70.3 for Deshaun Watson since he's returned. Now compare that to Jacoby Brissett, the guy that they had starting the whole rest of the season before that. He goes 236 of 369, 2608, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks. His passer rating 88.9, right? So, obviously Jacoby Brissett is not exactly a top-level quarterback here, but compared to all of the things that were given up in this trade, we're talking trade resources, we're talking about the reputation of the franchise in general. Even if we're not even talking about the off-field stuff, which obviously is way more important, even just from a football sense, is this one of the most catastrophic trade signing when you consider the contract that he got? Football history, sports history, where does this one rank so far?
I think, if it continues this way on the field, yes. We had not talked about him at all in 2 4-down territory since he came back. I have not done any tape pieces on him. I've talked to a lot of people sort of in the back rooms, like, should we do it yet? No, let's wait. But imagine that you traded a bevy of draft picks and a few good players for Russell Wilson, signed Wilson to a massive contract, and then saw it all fall apart. Hello, Broncos. Then add in all the off-field stuff. So this is like the Russell Wilson trade minus. And, I have no doubt that Watson will eventually regain some of the skills that made him such a great quarterback in 2020, where he was like an MVP candidate, and like all the stuff, like against too high, he was the best quarterback. In RPO, he was the best quarterback. Under pressure, like all the things that make you a great quarterback, he was the best in the league in all of them. And then 700 days later, it takes a while. Took a while for Michael Vick after, going to prison and all that.
For sure.
But that's how toxic he is that we haven't discussed it, and we have all agreed consciously not to. So even if he's able to become an MVP level quarterback again down the road, and I have serious doubts based on what I've seen, the well has been so poisoned it almost doesn't matter. Like, what if he leads the Browns to the Super Bowl? That is a metaphor for something else, obviously. Who cares? What does it matter? What will be the story during Super Bowl week? So, to me, it's always going to be the worst thing that Browns have done since moving to Baltimore. It's at that level of just catastrophe. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, that's the thing for me, Doug. We could get into the tape and we could talk about, the finer points of why he hasn't played well the last couple of weeks. But for me, it just still doesn't matter. Like you said, it was a terrible trade already before he took a snap. 2 games later, it's still a terrible trade, and I just don't even care that he hasn't played well. It has nothing to do with what's happening on the field and whether or not he succeeds. He could lead them to a Super Bowl, and I don't think it would make it any less of a terrible trade. I've talked to many Browns fans already who lifelong fans of this franchise who don't know what to do with their love for their team anymore, right? They don't know if they can continue to root for the team because of this move they've made. And obviously, again, the on-field results have been bad, but it still pales in comparison to willingly handing the keys to your franchise, the face of this franchise, and all of it comes along with that, the branding and the way you are perceived by your community and your fan base. Handing that to someone that was going through the type of off-field situation that it was created here, it takes a lot for diehard fans of really any team, but Browns fans in particular, for those people who have rooted for that team all their lives.
And I've already withstood so much.
Yeah, for this to be obviously a bridge too far for so many of them, I think speaks volumes about what a terrible move this was for this team. Really in every way. And we said that when it happened. It's still the case now. And honestly, I genuinely feel bad for those Browns fans who kind of don't know whether or not they need to find a new team now.
And the difference between Watson and Vic, I mean, I am an animal lover. My stepdaughter has a bully, so I specifically and particularly love pit bull dogs. I just adore them. It was really, really hard to deal with what Vic was involved in, but he went to prison. He paid his debt. With Watson, there was a story where he just kind of settled so people wouldn't get triggered. Settle with the NFL. So there's also a feeling like this guy just skated on all this horrible crap that he did, whether he did it or not. I mean, it's still really hard to know where to go with this story.
It really is, Doug. And moving on to other, football topics actually on the field. I mean, let's go to the NFC North. Let's go to the Lions. They beat the Vikings on Sunday. They were favored in this game, and I think a lot of people were surprised by that. But then they go and they back it up, right? They go and beat the Vikings, and then they seal the game in the best way, right? You have a 9-yard pass.
It wasn't a thick 6, but it was a thick 9. So yeah,
it was. That's true. But obviously, Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle, catches a huge third down pass with 2 minutes left to kind of seal that win for them. A huge win in the division in front of their home crowd. He goes in motion pre-snap, right? That makes it even better. Massive offensive tackle moving down the line. He goes in motion from a stack formation a few plays before that on a handoff to Jamal Williams.
Outside receiver in both cases. I just love it.
Yeah, they line him up just like a regular wide receiver, like you do. But Dan Campbell, the head coach, after the game, right? He says that they also have a red zone package for Sewell, which we need to see as a receiver. He said that he could be a Hall of Fame tight end if he just maybe weighed a little bit less than 331 pounds, right? But hey, if we had to broaden this topic, right, across the whole NFL, which other offensive tackle in the league do you think might be able to make his bones as a receiver beyond the occasional gimmick play here and there?
I'm going with the left tackle on the best offensive line in professional football right now, which is Eagles left tackle Jordan Mailata. He's 6'8", 365, and when he's on the field, when he's on the hoof,
he can sing, Doug. He can sing.
Yes, he can. He looks like he could run about a 4.9 40. He has a history in Australian rugby, which led him to the NFL's International Player Pathway Program. And the Eagles didn't get him because he could perfectly execute a wham block. He had no idea what he was doing, and they got him because he's an absolute freak athlete. Eagles O-line coach Jeff Stoutland, who was the best in the business, had to teach Mailata the position from the ground up. And are you going to tell me that Mailata couldn't learn a red zone package like that? A couple of, dual slants and whatever, and completely destroy. Imagine you're a linebacker in red 2, and you have that coming at you. I don't think so. Especially in the Eagles offense as it's constructed right now. As the president of the Thick Six fan club, I now want to see this more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously biased on this one, but I want Tristan Wirfs. I want the Bucs All-Pro 23-year-old right tackle to do it. He's got a little bit of an injury right now. He's been out for a couple weeks, but at full strength. I mean, again, this was the guy who was jumping out of swimming pools coming out of Iowa, right, at 6'5", 320. Yes. I think the Bucs are obviously much better off keeping him at right tackle, considering all the injuries they've had at the offensive line and the fact that Donovan Smith's not playing very well on the left side. Either you got to protect Tom Brady, so I would assume that they want to keep him in there. But man, he might be pound for pound a top 10 athlete overall in the draft, or not in the draft, but in the league. He was in that draft, but I don't know. He's such a ridiculous athlete. I'd love to see them be more creative in the way they use that, but he's pretty darn good as a pass blocker. And speaking of the Vikings, Doug, we'll stay there. They're now 10-3 after this loss to the Lions. They'd still be the number 2 seed in the NFC if the playoffs started today, behind the Eagles, obviously. But they have a negative point differential, right? They're -1 in the point differential so far this season. Despite that record, they've allowed more than 400 yards of total offense in 5 straight games now, which is a franchise record. And this team's been around since 1961, right? So that's pretty impressive, and not in a good way. I mean, is there any reason to still take them seriously as a playoff contender when they get to the postseason? I know that record is, you are what your record says you are, and that's impressive. But when
you're not,
when you really look deeper into this team, is this a team that we think is going to have some trouble there?
Luke, I think the Vikings are the NFC's version of the Titans. They have a pretty good quarterback who can be schemed up to great, a passing game that can be amazing, and the Titans don't have a Justin Jefferson, obviously, because they traded him to the Eagles. A top-level running back, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, you got that, and a defense going to be blown apart by a half-stiff Breeze. This is not a recipe for a deep playoff run. They are a good team with a record that's much better than they are, and this has happened to the Titans over the last couple of seasons. Vikings are 10-3, but according to Football Outsiders, they have 5.6 estimated wins coming into Week 14, and that's based on a lot of different. It's like, right. Okay, here's your record. Here's how good you actually are, and that's sort of you are what your record says you are. Estimated wins gets you a lot closer. And that defense, say, against the Eagles in the playoffs, who, by the way, beat the brakes off them 24-7 in Week 2, not going to happen. They're a good, not great team who have played far above their heads in a record sense. And unless they shore up all these things before the postseason starts, I mean, you go back to the Lions game, who was covering Jamison Williams on that touchdown? You got to go with Tyreek Hill speed. You might want to send one of your deep guys after him. Didn't happen.
Maybe.
You know, who do they match up with? The Eagles? Absolutely not. The 49ers, even with Brock Purdy? No. Cowboys on a good day? Doubt it. Buccaneers? Maybe. But that's about where I put them. A good but fundamentally flawed team, no matter their record. You throw the record out, you watch the tape, you look at the stats, it's a different story.
Yeah, if anybody watched the Bucs on Sunday, just know that being compared to them is probably bad right now. If that's your comparison for how your team is doing this year, that's probably not a reason to be excited or encouraged.
I like what Todd Bowles said about Brock Purdy. He didn't really challenge us. Like, yeah, he did, Todd. What are you doing here?
I could write a dissertation and probably will for Bucs Wire this week about how many problematic things were said after Sunday's game. Yeah, I mean, listen, the Vikings have been showing us who they are all year, right? It's time we believed them. You know, they, like you said, arguably the best receiver in the league, one of the best running backs in the league. They have a decent quarterback, which is more than I can say for a lot of teams. Really good tight end now in TJ Hawkinson. Everything else makes me nervous, right? I mean, the fact that they have won so many of these close games is encouraging in one way, but it's a very double-edged sword, right? Because it's important to find ways to win those games, but it also means that they're not very far away from being a sub-500 team, like you said, with those analytics that you have there. They're on a razor's edge with that, right? They could very easily have a losing record right now, and nobody would really be surprised based on the totality of the football that they've played.
Well, in 2021, didn't they have they lost all their one-score games? So this is just progression going the other way.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, they may be the number 2 seed, right? And they may be that now. They may stay that way going into the postseason. But I mean, I think there's a galaxy, an ocean, whatever, between the Eagles and the rest of the NFC, and that's, you know, Minnesota included. I don't see them anywhere near on that level, and I don't see them anywhere near as good as their record says they are. Sorry, Bill Parcells. Doug, we got to talk about Justin Herbert, man. We got to do it. We got to wade into this conversation, right? We've seen all the hot takes. It's time to unpack a little truth, right, from what we've seen from Justin Herbert this year. Sunday night against the Dolphins, the Chargers win that game. Herbert becomes the most prolific passer in the first 3 years of an NFL career, passing Andrew Luck's mark, obviously, 12,957 yards from 2012 to 2014. Herbert has now exceeded that.
I mean, he's got a few games left in his third season.
He does. And obviously we've got the whole social media quarterback conversation happening around him. Not even sure what that means. But listen, you know, we've got all this analysis and these critical takes and these clips and all of this conversation happening around this player right now. But what's the truth? Where are you at with Justin Herbert, the actual player, and what you're seeing on Sundays, and what does it all mean for him?
Let's start with this. I think a few people have glommed on to Herbert in a negative sense because they want to make it about themselves. And this is what's wrong with analysis in sports. Actually, analysis in politics, analysis in most anything. Sure. If you're analyzing anything, you make it about the thing you're analyzing. You don't make it about you. It's not about you. But these people want to be the ones to, quote unquote, discover that, hey, Herbert isn't as good as we think he is based on these arbitrary whatevers that I just made up, and I know better. Guys, you don't. You don't know better, and you need to stop. Herbert, this is Monday morning. I'm doing a tape piece on Herbert for later today. And in my stat study, I discovered a couple things. Herbert leads the NFL in attempts, completions, and yards on throws not past the sticks. In other words, not for a first down. He also leads the NFL in dropbacks, attempts, and completions under pressure. Well, how does that happen? You have an unimaginative offensive coordinator. You have an offensive line that's banged up, and you have receivers that can't separate for anything. What's going to happen? Pressure. There are three kinds of quarterbacks, right? We know this. The quarterbacks you win with, the quarterbacks you win despite of, and the quarterbacks that you win because of. Herbert is, I don't care what their record is. This is where you throw that stuff out. Herbert is a transcendent quarterback, and I can say that with confidence because he's transcending everything around him. And the fourth down motion screen to DeAndre Carter at the end of the Chargers' first drive against the Dolphins, which gained 0 yards on fourth down and marooned the Chargers at their own 2-yard line, is an imperfect example of why that entire playbook should be locked in a shed and set on fire. If you can't see what he's really doing under some really adverse circumstances, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to help you. I'm kind of thinking we're watching a different sport. He's amazing. Next. But this whole thing of attaching yourself to a player like a pilot fish and just sucking all the blood out so you can elevate your own name, I think it's vile. I don't know what these people are doing.
Yeah, I think, aside from just Herbert specifically, I feel like, and I agree with everything you just said, I get frustrated with so much of modern sports television, right, because of the need to manufacture these like adversarial topics out of thin air, despite the fact that they're completely unnecessary, first of all, and really unhelpful to any substantial conversation about the game, which is why we're all here, right? We love to talk about the game. We love to break things down. There are going to be different ways in which we see things that we can be both right and wrong about at certain times, but we have to be able to admit those things, right? We have to be able to look and see. And again, coming from the draft world, right? I will put out rankings and I'll put out scouting reports every year, and I'm right about some guys and I'm wrong about some guys. But if I pretend I'm never wrong, or if I pretend I'm right about things I'm not right about, it's just for the sake of the debate, for the sake of the click or the share or the metrics and trying to drive whatever they're trying to drive with these conversations. It's so frustrating. In this Herbert conversation, there's just so many logical fallacies flying around. The goalposts are moving all over the place to retroactively back up whatever your first point was that you tried to make about him. I think at the end of the day, when you just look at the football player, he's still got all the mental tools, the physical tools that we've raved about all along. What he's doing despite his current circumstances around him is as impressive as anything he's doing on his own physically. I mean, he's a stud. I don't – even if there were no social media, that would be true because of what's happening on the field, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are things that are subjective and things that, Justin Herbert is not a great quarterback. It's wrong. It's objectively wrong. I don't know what else to say. But this is, well, everyone thinks he's great. I'm going to try and, carve a niche over here. Don't. Just don't.
I get it. I get it.
You and
that's
I
that's really all we're trying to do here, Doug. We're trying to carve a niche. We're trying to have some fun and talk some football, but at least we're going to do our best to be honest with you about what we see, right?
You and I have both been wrong. We both evaluate draft prospects, and that's where being wrong is easy because you just don't know. We both have our list of, hopefully you learn from it. You say, okay, what did I get right? I'll go back and I'll self-scout. What did I get wrong here? What did I miss? Herbert, by the way, was one of the guys I got really wrong coming out of Oregon because that was this guy has had more bad offenses and he's I mean, that offense, you remember that offense. Ugh.
Yeah. What quarterback gets better as a rookie than he was the last year he was in college because just not playing in that offense.
I didn't see the tools past the offense. I got so involved in the tape that I missed the forest for the trees. And I didn't really scout Herbert, the player. I didn't isolate Greg Cosell, who, NFL Films, ESPN's NFL Matchup. I've known Greg for like 15 years. He's taught me more about football than anybody. And yes, one of the things he told me early on, isolate the quarterback. Don't focus on the offense. What does the quarterback do? I forgot that. So my draft evaluations on Justin Herbert were stupid. They were dumb. They were wrong. And I went back and I tried to learn from it. I didn't create a social media quarterback freestyle. And I'll just leave it at that.
I had a third round grade on Josh Allen. I will not have a third round grade on Anthony Richardson. I will not make that mistake again.
No.
I will bank on the upside.
I might have a third round grade on Will Levis, but let's save that for later.
We do, Well, bank on the upside, and hopefully you will too with the potential we have here on our show. Maybe we thank you as always for joining us here on 4 Down Territory. We have a lot of fun. We hope you do too. Once again, and as always, for Doug Farrar, I'm Luke Easterling. We will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.